Is L337 a feminist? If by feminist you mean a caricature of a hyper-annoying, ideology-obsessed, victim culture-claiming Tumblrina, then yes, L3 is definitely a feminist and a hyper-annoying one as well. If by feminist you mean something that promotes feminist ideology, I have to disagree. And that's because she's obsessed with droid rights, which is something that is in place in various sci-fi settings, and has been a theme in science fiction for a long time now, actually almost 100 years, since the idea that there might be autonomous beings being able to be made by humans. I actually think it's a theme that's very out of place with Star Wars, not because it has any connections to modern feminism or modern third wave feminism or the SJW movement or anything like that, but just because I figured with a society that's like 20,000 years old, they would have figured out whether droids were actually sentient and what their beings are. And my take on Star Wars has always been that droids are essentially programmed and aren't fully sentient, which is why they tend to have this kind of odd relationship with people. People view them as kind of valuable, but they don't really view them as people. And that theme being present in Solo, a Star Wars movie, I thought was really annoying and not really believable. I didn't see any parallels to modern feminism. So if you're drawing those parallels, then you're intending to draw them, in my opinion, and you're looking through your anti-SJW lens to find the threads that are going to connect to our modern world. The character was hyper annoying because of it, so she was acting like a feminist. But in that case, that caricature of her is really kind of a negative view of feminism, if you want to view that particular droid as a feminist. And if it's a negative view of feminism, like an overtly, directly negative caricature of feminists, I don't know if you could call that an SJW movie as a result, or that particular part of the movie was SJW themed. Now that's kind of my take on the droid. So if people are like, oh, this is, it's this SJW droid, it's like, it's acting like an SJW, but it's not promoting the ideals of SJWs. If anything, it's just talking about slavery in general. There's slavery in the Star Wars universe. The Wookiees were enslaved. Chewbacca was a slave in the movie. And we don't really need any thought to rebuke that, but how we think about droids, for example, to have that kind of be put up in front of you like, have you thought about whether droids were autonomous or not? It's like, I figured a 20,000-year-old galactic span, or galaxy spanning society would have figured out exactly what droids were and how to kind of had that figured out. Here's the other thing: is Lando Calrissian a pansexual? Well, in the movie you only see him flirt with women. You don't see him flirt with dogs, and you don't see him flirt with tables or something, right? And if you don't know what pansexual means, it means you could be attracted to anything. So people take that and stick it with his relationship with this droid and say, well, he's having sex with the droid. And he was having sex with her off camera or something like that. That's not really implied in the movie as I saw it. In fact, one of the only actual laughs that comes from L3 is when she remarks that Lando is in love with her, and it's a comedic moment. It's timed in a very comedic way, that it's really silly that this droid thinks that a person happens to be in love with her. And then the character that's opposite her asks, like, well, how does that work? And she's like, it works. And then so it just kind of glosses over this idea that droids can have some sort of relationship with people. And then you have this scene where Lando gets really, really upset about the droid being blown apart. And, he's very sad about it. And I didn't take it as like, well, he's upset about missing his sexual partner, but his only friend in the world, like his best friend, his co-pilot, his Chewbacca to his Han Solo, if you want to make that kind of comparison. So he tries to pull her into the ship and save her, and they end up plugging her into the ship and putting her database and personality into the ship, which is a weird thing that they kind of came up with. I called it like a Star Trek jargon moment, which is like, we need a solution to this. It's like, let's throw some jargon at the audience and come up with a solution. So I didn't interpret that as like Lando was actually having sex with this droid, but that the idea of it was quite preposterous because of the timing involved with it. And likewise, you don't see Lando being pansexual. Now, where do these ideas come from? Well, it comes from all of these articles that surround Star Wars, which I personally don't really spend any time reading. I don't consume any Star Wars media other than the movies that I choose to watch and review. And this is one of those reasons, is that if an actor comes out and says like, oh yeah, Lando's pansexual, and this was one that I couldn't really avoid. Lando's pansexual, then people go into the theater looking for that, and they're going to align the events. You do a little bit of a prescription, and you kind of synthesize what's there rather than just, looking at it for what it is. And I kind of just saw it as a guy upset about like his friend being blown up, because he obviously can't have a relationship with a droid. That seems rather preposterous, and they time it that way. The other one was, oh yeah, this robot is a feminist because I think the actress who played it said, well, it's a feminist. Well, there's no feminist themes. It's acting like a caricature of an annoying feminist, and is, in fact, in my opinion, the most annoying Star Wars character of all time. Just absolutely awful to try to watch on screen. Completely annoying, and the characters appear annoyed by her as well, and the audience kind of cheered when she got blown up because she was so annoying. There were people that actually clapped, which is something I think you might have missed the mark on your character if the audience is clapping at her demise. But there's you have to look at two things, right? So there's all these articles that surround it. Are these articles putting an interpretation upon the work that is actually in it, or is that affecting people's perception of it? So if you look at just what's in the movie, I think those interpretations are a little bit far-fetched, particularly that the droid is promoting feminist values. Like, no one believes in slavery, really. It's just kind of an out-of-place rebukement of droids in this universe that have never been treated like sentient beings. They're programmed robots. And so that's kind of my complaint about that and why I was annoyed by it. The other thing about this is, why do they go out and they say all this stuff to the media? And it's because the media gives them huge amounts of attention to do it and gives them massive amounts of approval. So if you come out and you say Poe Dameron is gay, this was the thing that happened a couple years ago. Poe Dameron in the movies is not gay. He's not anything, right? He has no relationships of a sexual nature with any other characters. He just kind of goes through the plot being a normal dude. It's like saying, oh, Luke Skywalker's gay. Well, he doesn't have any, in fact, he kisses his sister and appears to enjoy it when he doesn't know it's his sister. So really, we should assume Luke is heterosexual. But, he's not in a relationship with a girl in the movie. That doesn't mean he's gay. So seeing Poe Dameron, he's not portrayed as gay. He doesn't come off as some sort of gay stereotype either. He's just a normal character acting like a normal man. And so when we kind of impose these layers upon it, it gets a bunch of publicity. The Huffington Post will go out and push those articles over and over and over, and it gets a lot of attention. So to a certain extent, I think actors and even people that do writing are really encouraged to just kind of say these things. It's like saying Dumbledore is gay after the fact, because you get all this approval from the SJW side of the press. They really, really like to hear that there's lots of queer characters and every character has to be queer somehow. But if you look at the actual movies, if you look at the actual art, is there anything in there that would reference that? And in most cases, it's no, right? If you look at it truthfully. And I think that's actually, for me, that was the case with the pansexual thing. I'm like, well, I'm actively looking for it. I only actually see him flirting with women. And he doesn't really act flirtatious with his robot. He just acts normally like a friend with his robot as well. So I was actually on the lookout for that, like putting on my anti-SJW lens, and I'm like, I don't think he's being actually portrayed as pansexual. He might be, but you're only seeing him act as like a heterosexual male in the film. And that's the same thing with like Poe Dameron or any of these other characters. So I don't know, there's this obsession with trying to make everything queer, and you get a ton of attention if you come out and say some stuff like that. So Disney's not going to come down and say like, hey, you shouldn't say that the character's gay because we might get, there's no such thing as negative press. You're just going to get it spread out. And only the people who are kind of on the other side are going to be like, why does every character have to be queer? And at the same time, it's like, if Poe Dameron's gay, it's like, who cares? Like, that doesn't impact his story. So why are we talking about it? We're talking about it because it makes business sense to talk about it. That's the main reason. So that's pretty much all I have to say about that. It's an interesting topic. You guys can continue to debate it. someone mentioned to me that like, oh, well, I thought this character, this L3 character, once I realized that it was a caricature of a Tumblrina, then it was really funny to me. I'm like, I really didn't have that perspective and I didn't think about it that way. But now that I kind of put that lens on it, I'm like, yeah, the character could possibly be more humorous. I said she was the worst character ever, but maybe I'll watch it again, and I'll put on my, this is making fun of SJW's lens, and it might be quite a bit funnier. So we'll see how all that turns out. Let me know what you think down below. I just thought I'd talk about that briefly. You have to be kind of careful when you're hunting monsters. This is a Nietzsche quote that funny story how I got into actually originally reading all that, all Nietzsche, Beyond Good and Evil, and Thus Spoke Zarathustra, and some other books. As I saw the quotes on black metal and death metal records, and so one was on a death record called The Sound of Perseverance that I got in like 1996. Be careful when you're hunting monsters that you don't become a monster. And when you look long into the abyss also looks into you. And the moral of that, that sort of saying, that piece of wisdom, is that if you hold a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Is that if you are really obsessed with being anti-SJW and you're trying to see it everywhere, chances are you're going to become a lot like an SJW in your virulence and your hatred towards the thing you oppose. I'm not saying anyone watching this is like that. It's just a general warning. You want to try to keep yourself objective. There is a culture war going on to an extent, and because of that, it's hard to know what you should think about any particular thing. But try to keep your head on straight and try to keep yourself objective with it, and that's what I'm trying to do. And I can't really look at Solo, a Star Wars movie, and say, well, this is SJW propaganda. In fact, it probably looks like the opposite, especially when you put on the lens of like, I think this character is making fun of feminists. So anyway, let me know what you think down below, and I'll see you guys next time.